It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Thank you so much, Doug Donance. It is great to be back here on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with y'all. Hope you're doing well. I'm doing spectacular, but I'd be that much better if you would just wipe your feet before you come on inside. Come on. You've listened to this enough times to know what I'm talking about. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair where each episode we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. That's how we play the game. It's just that simple. So there's that. I hope that you're ready for a great episode today. We've got two special guests. We've got Gary Seath and Brad Robinson from the Not Ready for Primetime podcast joining Thomas down in the bunker. And they're going to talk about Laraine Newman, one of the original Not Ready for Primetime players. And they're going to make a case for why she should be in the SNL Hall of Fame. But ultimately, it's up to you to cast the votes. Let's walk on down the hall and talk to our friend Matt Ardill in his Minutia Corner. Let's do this. Matt!
JD!
We're here in your corner, and
Yes.
You know what that means.
Time for trivia.
That's right. What have you got for us on Laraine Newman?
Well, she's 5'5", born March 2nd, 1952. She was born in LA with a twin brother, Paul. Attended Beverly Hills High School and the California Institute of the Arts. She is the self-proclaimed daughter and granddaughter of Jewish cowboys. The family comes from cattleman stock, and her grandfather was the sheriff. Her father and grandfather both ran a cattle drive through Calabasas, which is very posh now, but back in the 1930s, it was a farming town.
Wow.
She began improv at 15, auditioned for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, and the Bristol Old Vic, but she didn't make it past the second audition on any of those. So instead, she moved to Paris to study mime with Marcel Marceau.
Wow.
She became a member of the Richmond Shepherd Mime Troupe, and at 19, then returned to L.A., as one of the founding members of the Groundlings, with her sister, Tracy Newman, who's a film writer and producer. She has a very storied past. Before getting into comedy, she worked as a rock band booking agent, handling contracts and gigs. And the song Never Let Her Slip Away by Andrew Gold is actually written about her because they were dating, and I'm guessing he regrets having blown that opportunity.
I bet you're right.
Yeah. I had a crush on her big time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, she landed her first role on the TV series Manhattan Transfer and followed that up by filming Tunnel Vision, which was filmed before the first episode of SNL, but was released after that, and it was alongside many of her future castmates. She was actually hired by Lorne Michaels for a Lily Tomlin special in 1974. She's gone on to acquire 244 acting credits, and she also wrote a memoir, May You Live in Interesting Times, a memoir, which is on Audible. She later moved into voice acting, and is in a bunch of cartoons, Danny Phantom, Avatar The Last Airbender, and Metalocalypse, amongst many. She's a contributing writer to One for the Table, Huffington Post, Los Angeles Times, The Believer, and McSweeney's. Has been nominated for Primetime Emmys, Annie Award, Behind the Voice Actors Award, and received a Television Academy Hall of Fame Award along with the original SNL cast.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And not only that, she has created a legacy. Her daughter, Hannah Einbinder, went on to become one of the leads of the show Hacks and is freaking hilarious and a great stand-up in her own right. She was...
Did not know that.
Yeah, she was in Toronto at Comedy Bar about 6 or 7 months ago. Super freaking hilarious comedian. So funny runs in the family. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to what Gary and Brad are going to share with us about Laraine.
Yeah, me too. They've got a fun person to talk about. It's going to be really interesting. Should we go to them now?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, let's do it. Take it away, Thomas.
Hi, JD and Matt. Thank you so much. Yes, we are here. Welcome to the SNL Hall of Fame. Another great episode for you all. And to join me to chat about one of the original cast members, somebody who we all hold in such high regard, Laraine Newman. Joining me to talk about Laraine Newman is a duo that I've had on before from an amazing podcast, a wonderful podcast. I am a subscriber. Listen every week, and
You're
before
the
I
one.
even knew them. You're so self-deprecating, Brad. That's part of your charm. Well, I was a listener before I even met you guys or thing so you guys do a great job. The Not Ready for Primetime podcast. I'm welcoming Gary Seath and Brad Robinson. How you two doing?
Good. Thank you for
Hey,
having
buddy.
us, Thomas. Good to be back.
Always
Yeah,
a fun
great
time.
to have you back. Yeah, you were here last season talking about Michael O'Donoghue, like the last gasp, as it
Yes.
were,
That-
possibly.
That went well.
Well, I think the episode, Brad, it's about the journey, not the destination around here.
Wait, is that really? Because I thought your whole podcast was about the destination. Is it not to get
There's
into the Hall of Fame?
I believe the finite goal is the destination with the Hall of Fame.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
yeah, I guess,
Maybe
I
we're
guess if you
wrong,
wanna
that's
be,
why.
If you want to be technical, we have a stated purpose here on the, I guess,
Okay.
in the title of the podcast, SNL Hall of Fame. But I'm like kind of a touchy-feely kind of guy. I have
This is
my
true.
like a Zen attitude, so it is
Yeah.
about the destination. So I really enjoyed that Michael O'Donoghue episode.
It was fun. It was very fun.
It was a lot of fun, even if we couldn't pull the votes yet
Yeah.
for Michael
Yet.
O'Donoghue.
Oh, it's quite all right. So today you're joining me for Laraine Newman, which
Yes.
I'm excited to get into. Before we do that, Brad, tell us what's been happening on the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. Gary, if Brad doesn't do a sufficient job, you can chime in too.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We do a deep dive through the original era of SNL, the first 5 seasons. We are currently wrapping up season 2, just about done. I feel like we're very close to your second appearance this season for our Eric Idle episode. Right around this time, it's got to be coming out. But yeah, we're finishing up season 2, and then we're going to try to take a little bit of a break. And season 3 will be starting up in May.
And we are going to do some fun specials in between seasons 2 and 3 as well, which will be a lot of fun.
And Thomas will be there. So there you go.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there. I'm looking forward to that. I've been really honored to be able to take part in the podcast. I'm apparently now the British correspondent,
That's right.
as
Yeah.
it were. I've been on for, who was that, Dudley Moore and Peter Cook, and 2 Eric Idle episodes now.
Yes.
So it's been a lot of fun being the British correspondent, being the correspondent for funky white musicians
Yeah.
as well.
Okay, easy.
Introducing us to the Boz Buds, even though I believe Brad and I, neither one of us are actual Boz's buds, but
But you're closer than you were before that episode.
Sure.
Maybe.
more of an appreciation. You just don't want to hurt my feelings.
That's exactly right.
But we love Thomas. We have loved having you on. It's so much fun every time we have you on. The last time we had you on, my wife I laughed so hard. She's like, "What were you doing?" She's never seen me laugh so hard. So we have a blast when you come on. Thank you so much for supporting the show and coming on like you do. We love it.
You guys are awesome. You guys let me I get to let my hair down a little bit on your podcast.
Yeah.
I get to be just the guest, just the wisecracking guest. And I think I put the burden on Gary to kind of edit the dumb stuff out that I say.
Oh, it's not you that I'm editing out, Thomas. It's the other one.
Okay.
Oh,
Here
boy.
we go.
Okay, here we go, guys. So check it out, the Not Ready for Primetime
Please,
podcast.
yes, thank you.
Yeah. It's a great podcast. So you guys are immersed in the first 2 seasons of SNL. So perfect guys to come in and talk about Laraine Newman. So just a little background. Laraine Newman, a groundling out in LA. She knew Lorne prior to SNL. She from working on a Lily Tomlin special in 1974. That was kind of her one of her ins with Lorne. And she impressed him so much, she became an original cast member. So guys, I wanted to start off, a lot of the original cast knew each other prior to SNL. But Laraine, again, came from the groundlings in LA. So do you think her not having as much of a rapport with the other cast prior to SNL, do you think that made for somewhat of an uphill climb for her, possibly when the show started? Like, what do you think of those dynamics of the cast when the show started?
I think at the very beginning of the show, everyone was trying to feel each other out and who worked together well and who worked with what writer well, and everyone's trying to find their place. And I think Laraine in the early seasons showed the breadth of what she could do. And she was also a lot younger. I think we talk a lot about how Dan Aykroyd was so young. She was only 23 when the show started. So there's also that kind of like finding her place on this big national stage all of a sudden and being a lot younger than some of the other cast too. Right, Brad?
Yeah, I think it's more the age thing. She's being younger, and also, she was a California girl, so she's so far away from home at a young age, thrust into this environment with the personalities you have, your Chevy Chases, your John Belushis, your Dan Aykroyd, your Gilda Radner. So I think fighting amongst that and being so young, I think all those things is what led to her having to maybe what seems to be fighting a little bit more than some of the others.
Yeah, I think she was a great cast member in that sense, because like SNL, especially the early years, I always look at it as a sports team. And with a good sports team, you want to have a good season or whatever. Everybody needs to kind of slide into roles and see what holes need to be filled and everything. And they can't all be like Chevy Chase was the breakout star of season 1. Not everybody's going to be Chevy. You have to have role players and utility players. And that sounds like a dig, but coming from comedy nerds, being called the utility player is actually a really big compliment to me. So if I think of Laraine in that sense, that's a huge compliment. Did you see her kind of fill in a lot of those utility roles from what you've seen, especially in the first couple seasons?
Oh, 100%. I think that's what we're going to talk about a lot tonight is, and she purposely did not have a lot of recurring characters because she didn't want to do them. And so, I think on a surface level, you look at Laraine Newman and you're not going to see the characters Belushi had. You're not going to see the screen time Chevy had. But when you actually look at it, what you're going to see is that utility player, that person who was vital to making sketches work, making the show work. I was looking through kind of all the scenes that she was involved in. She's in tons of famous scenes and stuff. You remember, she's kind of like the cherry on top on a lot of those scenes. Like she just adds that little extra something that really ties it all together and brings it together. And I think she set the standard for what that was, both men and women moving forward on how you contribute and are a vital part of the show, but you're not the star, if that makes any sense. But you can't diminish how important that role is, like you were just alluding to.
Yeah, she adds a lot to a lot of sketches, and even when she's not the focus, she brings things that and maybe at first viewing, you don't realize it either. And you see it again later, and it's like, oh, look, she was brilliant in that. And she was, I think, so underrated with her singing. Like a lot of the singing that she did in the first few seasons totally goes unnoticed, but she's great. And she brought it, and she could sing in different voices and different characters and with different accents.
There's an episode in season 1 where the musical act's singing, and her and Gilda come out and are doing hula hoops. And I remember when we covered that episode, we're like, is there nothing she can't do? Like, there's nothing Laraine Newman you ask of her she cannot do. Sing, dance, hula hoop, impressions, characters. She can do everything.
And if you remember, I think it was with Candice Bergen was the host, and they all came out and hula hooped, and Laraine did not drop that hula hoop for the whole 4 minutes or whatever they were hula. It was amazing, and it was just like, it says those small little things that you don't really notice unless you look for it, and she was excellent.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm stepping on an example, but like you, Brad, you talked about her putting like that cherry on top of a sketch, the Bass-O-Matic.
Yes.
Wouldn't have been the Bass-O-Matic sketch, without Laraine Newman. It would have just been Dan rambling, which I mean, I'm a huge Dan fan. I don't mind if he's rambling on and on. But Laraine coming in there with her classic line.
Wow, that's terrific bass. We've got fish here.
That just completely adds to it. It was Lorraine's delivery, her charm. That's why they brought her in the 40th. Laraine was back doing that exact same line in that sketch in the 40th.
She takes that sketch from an A to an A+.
Yeah.
Like she literally, like it is an A sketch, and she makes it an A+.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to your point, Gary, about her singing, that's something I noticed too with a lot of the sketches I watched. Like an episode that you all covered in season 2, she did a Barbra Streisand.
Oh,
amazing.
Me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
It's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't just like, it was a funny song. If you really listen to the lyrics, it was a funny song. It was almost like playing off of Streisand, thinking very highly of herself. Mm-hmm. But it worked in a lot of ways because Laraine could sing.
But because I'm in love with me. I'm who everyone should be. 'Cause even if one of my films sucks, it still makes $4 million for me. Just for me.
When I first watched that sketch, I had to rewind it because I was so caught up in her actual voice and how well she was singing that I had to stop and go back and listen to the lyrics to listen to how funny it was, because it is a very funny song, but she sang it so beautifully as Barbra Streisand. It was excellent.
And to a point on how good that sketch is and how good she is, that was your first sketch after the monologue. And there was no intro. There's no Don Pardo saying, here's Barbra Streisand. It's literally they come in from commercial and it's her and she just starts singing. And she does a 3 to 4 minute tune on her own. And she is amazing.
Yep.
Also, it's the same episode. She did a Howard Hughes impression. So just as versatile and how good she is. Yes, she did a Barbra Streisand flawless impression and then does Howard Hughes later in the same episode.
Like old kind of wacko Howard Hughes.
Old wacko beard, like in a a hotel bed. Yes, that's the same episode.
Yeah. Is there so you all, again, you two have covered the entirety of seasons 1 and 2. Is there something that sticks out as far as Laraine that people should go back and you could point out to them, look, like it might be subtle or it may not, but this is what you should notice when you're rewatching those SNL sketches in terms of noticing Laraine?
I think I'm going to go first, Brad. I think that if you go back and rewatch the Godfather therapy session with Elliot Gould hosting, she plays Sherry. Like Brad said, she doesn't have many recurring characters, but that's one. She plays
first time we saw Sherry.
This is the first time we saw Sherry, right? And if you go back and watch that scene, she owns the whole first half of that sketch, where she's the one carrying the story forward as Sherry, talking to Belushi as the Godfather, and it's excellent.
Now we're getting someplace. What do you think about that? Drugs? I'm against them. We have to go in there.
Vito, I'm not kidding. You're still blocking your real feelings. What about the rest of it?
Vito? Well, a restaurant linen supply was never a big money maker in the first place.
Oh, you're
So you have to-
hurting Vito and you're covering up.
That performance in that sketch is one that when we watched it again, I think we both appreciated her performance so much more than I think we had in the past. Is that fair to say, Brad?
Yeah, I agree. Most people remember that sketch for John Belushi's Godfather and what a showstopper it was. And I was that way too. And then we watched it again. And Laraine Newman has to stop at one point because the audience goes so nuts for her and her character that she had to stop and let it quiet down to keep going. So that's one. And the other one I would say, and again, and it's not a knock, it is hard to find a lot of Laraine Newman standouts. But it's not her role. And I don't mean as a knock. It's not her role. The other one I would say is it's another season one, The Exorcist 2, when Richard Pryor hosted, and she plays the Linda Blair character tied up in the bed with the girl voice, and it's an amazing sketch, and she is so good in it. And that's another one that it's early on and highlights her as just an amazing performer.
Father Chorus, I'm ever so hungry. Couldn't you give me some pea soup? It's right over there. The bed is Jeepers, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, little girl. Thank you. Woo! You're such a nice little girl. I knew it all the time.
Thank you.
Here's your pea soup. Maybe now we can be friends, huh?
That's
what do
right.
you say?
Yeah, I think if somebody like Gilda had played that, I love Gilda. We all love Gilda. But Laraine provided almost the perfect level of creepy, like the level of acting. I think Gilda wouldn't have been it would have taken me out of the scene a little bit more if it was somebody like Gilda. But Laraine really had me immersed in it. And because I think she immersed herself in that. That's a standout, Brad.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an individual. But again, I as we said, I think her role is more elevating the sketch from an A to an A+, putting that cherry on top. Another example, Coneheads. Mm-hmm. Coneheads is a fantastic reoccurring sketch. We've seen it so many times. It's so iconic. If Connie Conehead is not in those sketches, the Coneheads are nowhere near as good as they are because she has that youthful element to it as the daughter. And she brings so much to those scenes, especially when they do the Family Feud, Feud sketch.
Okay, 12 people said sandwich. All right, Connie, something that people like to bite.
The big one.
The big one. All right, does our audience bite the big one? Well, we all want to know that one.
But every single time, she just brings so much to that you can't undercredit what she brings to the Coneheads in general.
And she plays that role really well in a bunch of different scenes as the teenage daughter or the younger person in the sketch. There's a sketch in season 2 where Dan and Gilda play a couple that own a restaurant, and they go in the back and fight, and she has to come out and play the recorder for the customers. And she doesn't say anything for the first maybe 3 or 4 minutes of the sketch. And then when she does, she's pleading for help for these people because their parents are crazy. And the way that she does it, she just embodies this young teenager that you feel really sorry for her in a funny way. She still pulls it off comedically, but she also brings this sense of emotion across in a lot of what she does that I think is underrated. And it really drives some of these scenes forward.
She was a really good actor. She made almost everything she did on the show believable. Everything that we're talking about, I believed it and I was immersed in it because Laraine was. And it's interesting that we talked about a couple of her recurring, Connie Conehead and Sherry. What I really enjoyed about Sherry was that she, being Sherry, was put in different situations. It was almost like they weren't calling attention to the fact that it was a recurring character, because Sherry was in all these different situations. She didn't have like this theme song. Don Pardo wasn't doing a voiceover and saying, now Sherry. Like Sherry was in the playing opposite in Godfather Therapy. Sherry was in a sketch called Trans-Eastern Airlines that we had covered. She was in one that I love that was a great roast of all the writers from the early day. I Was Not a Sucker for Saturday Night. It was the Chris Christopherson episode at the end of season 1. That one, I forget what your review of that sketch was, but it had to be positive. I really enjoyed that one.
Because it was early in the episode and we hadn't drank that much,
was that the episode?
That was the episode.
Okay.
That was the episode.
But no, it was very good. She was fantastic in that character, and like you said, that they incorporate it in so many different ways. She does a sketch with Jack Burns in season 2 where like you don't even realize it's Sherry for like the first 30 seconds because it's so under the radar, and they don't, like you said, they don't oversell it.
And that's the beauty of the Sherry character, but a lot of the characters that Laraine plays is she's playing a funny character, but she is not the joke of the sketch. She is there to drive the sketch for everyone else to kind of land their big role, like John with the Godfather therapy session, but to do it in a funny way. And I think that's a big reason why she flies under the radar for people.
Would you say, and her being a groundling, the more we're talking about, I keep thinking of Phil Hartman, you know, the grounding character. And yes, maybe Phil was a bigger name or known bigger in Saturday Night Live, but I feel like she set the foundation for somebody like a Phil Hartman to come in and do what he did, because he's basically doing what Laraine did. He was that grounding force. He was the person adding to everything and making sure everybody around him could do what they wanted to do. And it's funny because, you know, they both came from groundlings and they have the same upbringing. I feel like, you know, you can kind of see that lineage there between the two of them.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Gary? I think that's a pretty good point.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, I think. I'm glad, Thomas, you gave that note to Brad to say. That was very kind of you. No, I think it's an interesting through line for the groundlings, too, because I think after Phil, like the groundlings that come in are a little different and a little more, they're bigger personalities probably than you would say Phil or Laraine were. But they do establish that type of cast member that can help be that grounding force for everyone. That's a good point, Brad.
And Thomas mentioned she's in the groundling. Let's not overlook, she's a founding member of the groundlings. Like if not for her, there may not be a groundling. So let's give some credit to her there too.
And again, when she was a founding member, she was 21,
right,
I think.
Right?
Like, yeah, she was a kid when she was doing all of this.
Yeah, when I did the Jane Curtin episode with Andrew Dick, and we kind of compared Jane to maybe the like a bass player. Like she's, you know, the a lot of times the music or the song won't work without them, but they're not front and center, and you don't immediately notice them, but it would just be weird without them, and they kind of keep the thing moving and going. With Laraine, she's almost that way. But I think there's maybe just sometimes a little bit more flair. So she's like, if she comes in and plays like a tambourine or just plays a great like instrument that you're not expecting, but she just kind of like adds that perfect thing. Like it's what the song needed.
Yes.
At that yeah. She's like the rhythm guitarist who can like throw in a solo every now and then. What do you mean?
I feel that understates how important she is. Like, I know what you're saying, but I don't. Yeah.
Theremin. What about a theremin, Brad?
You're going to have to explain to Brad what a theremin is first, Thomas.
Pretty much. Anyway, let's keep going. Not the podcast for that, guys.
No, but I think it just kind of speaks to that she and Jane in the early days had very unique roles compared to a lot of the other people on the cast, and she played it so well. And there's something, like, to me, a little, when she needed it, Laraine could be a little sinister in a lot of the characters that she played, or she can play in like the weird realm. Like in her third episode, she was Squeaky Fromm, and a lot of people even still remember her as Squeaky Fromm, right? Yeah, and she just had those like she could like pull the dead eyes out when she needed to. Like that's something that really stood out to me, is she can just like change her persona like that in an instant and be believable.
Our guest this week is Squeaky, infamous for her alleged attempt on the president's life and for her connection with the Manson family. Squeaky, welcome.
Die, lackey pig.
One thing I'm sure our viewers would be interested in knowing is just how you came to be called Squeaky. Is that a nickname Charlie gave you?
He isn't Charlie, he's the Holy Redeemer. Bourgeois hog face. Meet your maker.
Squeaky.
Well, to piggyback our last episode, which didn't work so well, she was a great voice for Michael O'Donoghue. There were tons of instances where Michael O'Donoghue would write, single person sketches, and more often than not, it'd be Laraine Newman because she was that good. Jane couldn't do it. Gilda, who was immensely talented, couldn't kind of have that dark side take that turn. And it says a lot to Laraine Newman. Now, you have to like Michael O'Donoghue. You have to know who the hell he is and what he's writing. But to that point, it shows her versatility that while she can play a little schoolgirl along with Gilda in a slumber party sketch, she can also play a really dark and scary corpse-like character coming up from a coffin for an infomercial written by Michael O'Donoghue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she can just do so much.
Do you think that was a deliberate thing by Michael O'Donoghue? Do you think he kind of looked at Laraine and said, "You're great for my voice, like for what I want to convey with my
absolutely.
sketches"? Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
Like
I think he had two. He had John on the male side, and he had Laraine on the female side. Yeah,
And you really saw it with Laraine early in the first season, really, with this flight attendant sketch where he calls. It's Michael O'Donoghue calls an airline, and you just hear his voice, and he's threatening her and harassing her with some really horrible Michael O'Donoghue type stuff. And Laraine is excellent because she just stands there with a smile on her face and it's just like, okay, thanks for choosing the whatever airline. And it just the way that she can, again, not be the driving comedic force behind a sketch, but add an element to it that's just like, oh, this works because of her. And Michael O'Donoghue then leaned into that really for the rest of their time working together.
Yeah, and if you're an SNL cast member, if you have a bond like that with a writer, it can go a long way. So I'm glad O'Donoghue saw something in her that was obviously very apparent. There's a couple of comparisons that I was thinking of when I was kind of going back and watching sketches and thinking about Lorraine's career. And relatively, I wanted to make them recent because
people will know who we're talking about. I agree.
Right? So
good call.
Just to kind of make like recent parallels, to kind of put Laraine in context a little bit. I'm sure most of our listeners weren't around. I wasn't around back then. But just to kind of put it in context for some people. So one person who I thought of was Bobby Moynihan. I think Laraine, in a lot of ways, was like a Bobby Moynihan. Bobby was sometimes maybe more front and center, but he excelled in filling in a lot of the gaps and made the most of side characters. Like when Bobby would come on as a side character, even if it was just like a pan to Bobby to say this 3-second line to move the sketch forward, I think he really excelled at doing something that specific. And there's a reason, like Bobby actually cites Laraine Newman as a comedic inspiration and one of his favorite SNL cast members. And I could kind of see that. Like, what do you think of her in terms of like a Bobby Moynihan type for the original cast?
I think it's a hard comparison only because when you think of Bobby Moynihan, you're going to think of like some standout characters that you see all the time. And it's because of what the show was when he was on then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where when she was on, you weren't trying to like make a name for yourself to do whatever. This is my grumpy old man speech. But no, I hear what you're saying. Yes, like Bobby Moynihan is a good example. Like somebody who it's utility, like we said, Phil Hartman. Mm-hmm. Bobby Moynihan, like put him in when you need somebody who you know can deliver.
What about, I agree with what Brad just said. I think Bobby Moynihan's a little flashier than Laraine was. So when they panned to him to deliver that line, he's a little not as subtle as Laraine, I think.
Yeah.
I was thinking someone like Chris Parnell, who could help carry a sketch, but wasn't necessarily like at front and center. He was there to work with Will Ferrell to drive a sketch, something like that.
Yeah.
Rachel,
yeah, I could
Dratch
see that as well. That's maybe a Rachel Dratch, although Rachel did have like Debbie Downer.
Oh yeah, that's
things
true.
like that. But I think like the overall, I mean, these aren't going to be like 1-to-1 comparisons, but I could see the Rachel Dratch thing as well. one current cast member who I think in a different SNL time, I think Laraine could have been kind of like a Heidi Gardner type in a different SNL time.
That's
and
a good
think
call.
If they had put more emphasis when Laraine was on the show on Weekend Update, because Heidi really excels, in my opinion, on Weekend Update. And if they had put this kind of emphasis that they have probably for the last, 30 years now on Weekend Update, if they would have put this kind of emphasis when Laraine was on the show, I think she could have really carved out a space on Weekend Update. But that's not what it was for. It was like basically, it was for Emily Latilla, sometimes John, but there was less emphasis on update pieces. But I could have seen Laraine really excel at that.
Well, and Laraine herself has admitted she didn't want to do that. She didn't want to do recurring characters. She didn't want to lean into that as much as the show may have wanted to. So some of it, as far as like her legacy or people remembering her, might have been a little bit self-inflicted because she was holding to her guns and not wanting to do those kind of things where like Gilda wanted to throw Emily Latilla out as much as she could. John couldn't get on camera enough. And Lorraine's like, no, it's not what I want to do.
She was subtle. I mean, one of Lorraine's recurring characters was Laraine Newman, the reporter,
right?
Who we would, Jane and Chevy would throw to. And even that character was not an over-the-top character. She was just, she would throw on this reporter voice and do these live hits. And, it didn't always work, but it was like a subtle character that she had. And it just happened to, be Laraine Newman, the reporter.
And she really was the first update correspondent, like that you'd go to time and time again. It was a cutaway, but they were figuring it out. Remember, again, there was no blueprint, so they're figuring it out. And she was the first correspondent for Weekend Update.
Yeah, that's true. She played it like a news lady, like a reporter. Exactly. Like she had that affectation, exaggerated affectation, but yeah, but I think there was a kernel there. Maybe like I'm imagining Laraine in a different time. That would have been so fun to see. Before I switch gears a little bit, because I am going to switch gears just a little, do you guys have anything else that, any point about Laraine or anything kind of on your minds in regards to Laraine?
I think if Laraine was not in the first 5 seasons and next to Gilda for her entire SNL career, she would be held in a much higher regard than I think she is, because she's just in the shadow of Gilda Radner. And I think she is going back and rewatching all of these old episodes, you really see how wonderfully talented not only Jane Curtin is, because Jane is great, but so is Laraine. And in a different time period, she would have excelled and could have been a star on her own.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I mean, there's a list again of sketches and iconic bits that you remember from the show that she's involved in. We mentioned Bassomatic, we mentioned Coneheads, E. Buzz Miller, Art Classics, classic Dan Aykroyd sketch. Who's his sidekick? Laraine Newman as Christy Christina. Olympia Diner, everybody knows it. Cheeseburger, cheeseburger, cheeseburger. Ensemble piece. She plays Sandy the waitress in all of those. Theodoric, Barbara of York, one of the best sketches of all time from season 3. She's in it as Jane's daughter. Uncle Roy, whatever you feel of it, it's an iconic sketch from back in the day. It's her and Gilda. She's involved in it. Season 4, the St. Mickey Knights of Columbus sketches. She plays Sister Serena, like she's in that. One of my favorite all-time commercial parodies, Puppy Uppers, is her and Gilda. So she's always prevalent in things, and she could do and she did impressions too. We mentioned Barbra Streisand, Howard Hughes. She did Shirley Temple, amazing.
Oh, that was excellent.
She did Amy Carter, and even just when Dan and John left after season 4. She tried to pick up the mantle. She tried to continue Tom Schiller's Bad series, playing Lady Pinth-Garnell, trying to, take over the mantle when Dan left of Leonard Pinth-Garnell. So it's just like there's just so many things to the point where
she was possibly the first person that Landshark got. She was in Landshark. And
she was in Landshark. Exactly.
Person that the Landshark got. She was, she was a great victim in there. She played it so perfectly oblivious and gullible.
Plumber, ma'am.
I don't need a plumber. You're that clever shark, aren't you?
Candygram.
Candygram my foot. You get out of here before I call the police. You're the shark and you know it.
Wait, I'm only a dolphin, ma'am.
A dolphin? Well, okay.
And she's been featured in every anniversary show they've done. She came out for the 15th. She was in the opening of the 25th with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. And then she did Sherry. She brought Sherry back for the 40th. So, like, she's obviously woven so tightly into this show, and is so important that every time they do anything where they look back or talk about it, she has to be included.
Yeah, she's beloved. She loves the show. She was Sherry in the Californians sketch in the 40s,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Of course, it lent itself to that. But it seems obvious that the show loves her. Lauren still has so much respect for her. She loves going back. She talks. I love. She has a really nice presence on social media, on Twitter. Like, she's so complimentary of the current cast and current SNL. And she's a really good follow, and she just has such a good spirit, and she's so positive about even like the current comedy landscape and the current SNL folks. It's really neat to see.
I should say, full disclosure, she did recently autograph a picture for us saying, "Friend of the pod, Laraine Newman," wearing a Blues Brothers, and a picture of her wearing a Blues Brothers t-shirt. So, which does not affect my arguing for her at all, but we do have it.
She's so cool. Gosh,
she's awesome.
She is. She's great.
What a cool lady. So you two, I of course, I'm going to take advantage of your presence here. And you two have become experts by immersion as far as like the original seasons go. And we've seen certain cast members get into the Hall of Fame from those seasons. Aykroyd, Murray, Gilda Radner, Jane Curtin, they're in. But it seems like some of the people responsible for the show's early success, who have less star power and camera time, still tend to go unrecognized. So do you think it's past time for some of those folks, especially people on the writing side, to get their just due? Not just Michael O'Donoghue. There's like a whole stable of them. So what do you think, like, as the people who are carrying the torch, like the SNL podcasting torch for the older seasons, like, what do you think about that?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of mentioned this when I was on the roundtable last season. I think the Hall of Fame is getting to that very interesting and fun place where, you know, you have all of your sure shots are in. And now you really need to look at who is important, you know, and who is really like a foundation member of like really creating what this show is and why it has lasted so long. And that's people like, yeah, your Laraine Newmans, your Michael O'Donoghues, your Franken and Davis, Rosie Schuster, you know, Buck Henry as a host. You can't, I mean, John Snyder, I know, has argued him many, many times, but it's like, like how there is not a statue for Buck Henry somewhere in Saturday Night Live land about this is what a host is. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Gary, what do you make of Buck Henry not already being in the SNL Hall of Fame?
I want to say it's a tragedy, because to Brad's point, like, he really defined the role of host, and you can see in those first two seasons how reliant the cast was when they knew that Buck Henry was hosting. And it was kind of like, oh, he's going to help us, both the writers and the cast, right? Because he had great writing talents. And he would bring things to the show and elevate the show for when he was hosting. So go back and watch his episodes, because he really sets the table for what the host should do.
And watch the good nights and watch just how much the cast seems to adore him.
Yeah.
As well. They always loved, like, it was Buck Henry week, and I'm sure the cast was really excited when it was Buck Henry week, because they could be creative. They maybe felt like they didn't have to carry the entire thing. They had a host who was more than capable. So he's one. A lot of writers, like we've mentioned O'Donoghue quite a few times. I'm halfway surprised about Franken and Davis.
I'm shocked about Franken and Davis, really, because they had a presence not just in the first few seasons, but then they came back later. So they were around in the late 80s, early 90s, and then Franken was even on the show for quite a while. So them not getting in is surprising, because the writers, and especially like seasons, I guess the end of season 2 and then season 3, really, they carry more weight in the show, right, Brad? So
they really commit. Yeah, season 3, they start to they start to come up as O'Donoghue starts to go down. So 3, 4, 5 is really that Franken Davis era. I mean, Al Franken almost took over the show when Lorne left. If it wasn't for Limo for Lamo,
he sabotaged himself.
He sabotaged himself. He would have taken over, and who knows what would have happened.
Right? Yeah. Those two surprised me, especially given Al Franken has the name recognition of the two.
I'm gonna tell you, the writer that surprises me the most as a fan, I can't believe Jack Handy's not in. Like, it's not even the era we quote unquote cover, but I think it's just because people don't know the stuff Jack Handy actually wrote. Unless you're like us and you really dive deep as a casual fan, you don't realize the sketches he wrote and the impact he had. But like, how Jack Handy is not in blows my mind.
Yeah. Probably my favorite writer of all time, Jack Handy.
I mean,
and he has a whole segment with his name on it.
Right.
So he has some recognition, even though I've told people when I was younger, I thought that was a fake name. It does sound vaguely dirty, honestly. But so when I was a kid, I was like, oh, that's just a fake. I didn't even register that was a real person. I actually thought that was Al Franken writing those under like a pen name or something.
Yeah. I think I did too when I was a kid back in the day.
Yeah, that's funny. He was responsible for some iconic sketches in that period with late 80s through much of the 90s. And then,
I mean, Herb Sargent, I believe the man has a WGA award named after him.
Right. That he does.
Okay. I mean, the guy is, I feel like you've got Lorne, you've got Jim Downey, and then I think like Higgins is probably up there as far as people impact on the show. And Herb Sargent. I mean, Herb Sargent has to be in there of what he's contributed to the show and the legacy he left of what he's done on that show.
Yeah, Herb was like the adult in the room that they needed.
Literally, yeah.
He was very much the adult in the room. He had been in TV
for decades.
Decades before that. Yeah, he was much older than everybody else, but he was that steady hand. He was the guy that they would go to for knowing how to do TV things, for wisdom. He and Chevy created Weekend Update, right? Herb and Chevy. I mean, Weekend Update. Gosh, of course, obviously it exists now. You have somebody like Herb Sargent, who was kind of a co-creator of such an iconic institution in Weekend Update.
And to that institution, many people think Norm Macdonald is their, or not think, but believe they like Norm Macdonald is their favorite Weekend Update host. Who was doing Weekend Update with Norm Macdonald? It's Herb.
Yeah.
Herb was there.
Did. Yeah.
He was there through, like, it's like, you know what I mean? He was there from Chevy and he was there through Norm Macdonald.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. He's one. We've advocated for Rosie Schuster.
Yeah.
Dick Ebersol to me is like, and it's hard to, because we have categories here at the SNL Hall of Fame. So it's like, he fits in technically the producer category, but I think I want to urge people to go back and listen to our Dick Ebersol episodes, me and Jeremy Dove. And Jeremy made a really great case laying out Ebersol's career and his impact on SNL. He co-created the show, he and Lorne.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he gets a bad rap for some of the way things played out later with him and SNL. But really, like the creation of the show, he was huge. He was fundamental in the beginning of the show.
Well, I remember on the round table again last season, I was like, I have my last vote I'm throwing in, and I was like, it's a bullshit thing, but I need the voice to be heard. And I was like, Dick Ebersol, like I have to bring up Dick Ebersol, I have to talk about him. And then like everybody else was like, no, yes, we all agree, like Dick Ebersol needs to get, like I thought no one else but me wanted to push him to be in, and everybody on that round table wanted him in.
Oh no, I'm a huge advocate for Dick Ebersol for sure, and he swooped in because Jean Doumanian, she gets a lot of crap. She took over for Lorne. She just probably wasn't the right fit. That just wasn't her. That wasn't her strong suit, was to actually lead the show like that. So Dick Ebersol did a great job of kind of picking up some of the pieces. I think they did 2 episodes at the end of season 6, and he's like, "All right, we're going to regroup, retool." Ebersol, with Lorne's blessing, by the way. He didn't just go, he talked to Lorne and got Lorne's blessing to go produce the show. He and Lorne, contrary to popular belief, even my belief, he and Lorne were friends and probably still are friends. And they go way back, obviously. But Dick Ebersol was so instrumental in not only creating SNL in the early days, but retooling SNL to give it the lifespan that it has.
He's definitely someone that deserves to be there.
And then you got people like Candy Bergen, a host from the early season, who put in some classic episodes. Is she responsible? Not responsible, but was she the host for... I don't know if you have thought about the best episode you've covered so far, but her second episode, maybe, I think in season one of her Christmas episodes has to be up there.
It's season 2.
Season two?
It's season 2.
Okay.
Because her Christmas episode for season 1, not very good.
Not good, okay.
But her first episode for season 1 is the one that many people consider where SNL really got its foot. It's where Chevy did, I think, Right Forward for the first time, or I'm Chevy Chase and You're Not.
Yeah.
And it really started coalescing. So a lot of people give that one credit. But her Christmas episode for season 2, I think, is probably, unless Buck pulls it off at the end, is our favorite episode of season 2. It is an amazingly great episode.
One of the
And
greatest
she did
episodes
some
of all
unique things too with the show. That she did interviews with some not comedic people, some real life people who are doing important things, and she brought them onto the show to talk to them, to advocate for things like equal rights for women and acknowledgement of the elderly. I forget what that association is called, but she had the trust of Lorne to do these segments where she talked to real people to like move things forward. And I think that was huge, and it was very different than any other host at the time.
Go back and watch Candice Bergen's is from season 2, the Christmas episode. Frank Zappa was the musical guest.
Yeah.
Just classic
Great guest.
sketch, classic sketch after classic sketch. To me, it's still almost 50 years later, one of the great episodes of all time
Yeah,
in
it
SNL
really is.
history. Yeah, I'm glad I have you guys on because I feel like there needs to be some advocating done on behalf of some of the older days. So I'm really happy to have you guys on to do some of that work.
Thomas, I know you're a huge sports fan, and Gary is as well. So let me make this analogy, and you guys can speak to it better than I can. But so like cast members, right? And there are amazing cast members still nominated both this year as new members and on the ballot from before. Maya Rudolph, Kate McKinnon, Will Forte, Vanessa Bayer. How do those people get in the Hall of Fame and Laraine Newman is not? Okay, you go to hosts, Justin Timberlake, Emma Stone, Melissa McCarthy, all great hosts. How do they get in the Hall of Fame and say a Buck Henry and a Candice Bergen are not?
Yeah.
You go to writers, Paula Pell, and Adam McKay, newer writers that people know and love. I get it. They are very great, and I love them as well. But how do you put them in without a Michael O'Donoghue, without a Herb Sargent, without a Franken and Davis? You know what I mean? How do you equate that to a sports analogy where like you need these founding people in before the younger folk get in?
Yeah, no, of course you needed like Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays and all those people. They set the foundation for, this year, like Adrian Beltre, Albert Pujols is going to get in at some point. But those guys set the foundation for all the sluggers that we see now. You're absolutely right. I think, Gary, do you think it's just lack of name recognition or just like they've been lost throughout history?
I think the writers, it's definitely lack of name recognition. And we're talking about someone like Buck Henry who, outside of SNL, how much do we know of Buck Henry, right? We know now what he did, right? He wrote The Graduate, all these things. But again, it's that name recognition. I don't think people now think of Candice Bergen as, a host really, even though she was the first female 5-timer.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's very important in the history of the show, and Buck definitely is. But I think they just don't have that name recognition of today. And with the writers, you have someone like, I love Conan O'Brien. I think he's excellent. He's an excellent writer, but he has talked about how, Jack Handey is his favorite writer ever, and he says that he was his favorite SNL writer of all time. And these people that, again, Herb Sargent, like set everything up so that someone like, Jost and Michael Che have Weekend Update now because Herb Sargent set that up to be what it is.
Yeah, well said. I just urge all of our listeners and voters to go give consideration. Go take a look at the resumes of O'Donoghue, Franken, and Davis, Rosie Schuster, Herb Sargent, Ebersol, Buck Henry, Laraine Newman, all of the people that set the groundwork for the show that we all love now. I urge all you guys to go reevaluate their candidacy and their resumes.
You know, back in the late 90s when they opened up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and they had the big Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concert, John Bon Jovi played a tune and he was telling the story and he was like, my mother told me the story of like, you know, think about who your inspirations are, who you like and who you admire, and then go back and look at who their inspirations are and who they admire. And I think that's exactly what this is. Like all these people that you love from this era and 10, 15 years prior, find out who they liked, who they were into, what got them into it, what triggered their love for it and got them excited. And then you're going to find these names we're talking about that started this show.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was a big Nirvana fan. And because of that, I became a David Bowie fan because they did The Man Who Sold the World Unplugged.
Yeah, sure.
I found out who Leadbelly was, Meat Puppets, kind of people like that. So it does. Like you find out the people who you love, who do they love? And that's such a great point.
Every once in a while, Thomas, I have one. When you let me have it.
You surprise me. Full of surprises, Brad. It's oh man. So I think we did a good job of talking about legacies of some of the old guard of SNL. I want to point it back to specifically Laraine Newman, though. What should her SNL legacy be? Gary, I'll start with you.
Oh, I honestly, I think her legacy is that more than anyone else in that original cast, she was the one who would set the table and be the foundation for sketches and let other people get the big laughs and help set them up. Like she set the template for what that type of cast member needs to be. That's what I think her legacy is.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think she set the standard, created the mold for what the utility player is, for what that person is, to let everybody else shine. And like I said before, and just add that extra something to take a great sketch to an iconic sketch, to make a good sketch a really good sketch, you know, to help pull stuff out. I know, again, sports, you guys are sports. I don't know how you would figure this out. I'm sure John and Mike over at Saturday Night Network could figure out some kind of algorithm, but like her batting average has to be huge. She's not hitting home runs. She's not knocking out of the park, but she is consistently giving you doubles and triples and knocking in runs when you need them. Like that's what she does. She's not striking out. She's not popping up. Like she is just consistently delivering what you need.
Yeah.
And at a time when you had a brand new show that had no feet under itself, you needed that more than ever. Did you need something like that?
Especially when the format wasn't set. So they were trying all different types of things. There were dramatic pieces, there were comedic pieces, they had jugglers on. We
do you remember the sketch where it was her and Gilda introduces Laraine just doing random impressions?
Yes.
And it's like a baby crying and a dog like it's just like random shit. Because they were just making it up as they went along.
Yeah, that was the episode where Gilda was like, I don't have a lot of airtime tonight, so I'm going to introduce Laraine. And she has Laraine do all of these impressions. And it's a solid 3 or 4 minutes of just Laraine doing amazing impressions of these awkward, weird things. And it's excellent. So, yeah, I mean, she's very underrated in my opinion.
So there's that. Really great job there, Gary and Brad. And of course, the ringmaster, Thomas, really pleased with that conversation. If you were listening and you are on the edge, I think they may have swayed you to casting a vote for Laraine Newman. We shall see. We shall see. Jane Curtin was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Gilda Radner was a first ballot Hall of Famer. It seems only right that Laraine Newman will also be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But if you need any more evidence, let's go now to 1975, Season 1, Episode 24. Chris Christopherson was your host, and Laraine is playing her reoccurring character, Sherry. Let's go to that sketch right now.
Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Hello, my name is Sherry Norwalk, and I got special permission from the FCC, that's the Federal Communications Club, to come on television and tell my story. Okay, last October, I went up to the Saturday night offices because I think the show was really boss and I wanted tickets. Well, they were out of tickets, but as I was leaving, Dave Wilson, the director, said I had a bitchin' bod, and would I like to come up and spend the weekend with him up in Parsippany, New Jersey, because his wife was dead. So I went up, and it was really great and everything, except his wife wasn't really dead. She'd just gone shopping. God, creative people can be so forgetful. Anyways, I got this phone call from the show the next day, and they said that David recommended me for a job as a secretary for $14,400 a year. And they didn't even mind that I couldn't type or file or do shorthand. So they told me I was going to do light secretarial work and maybe help the writers out if I could sometimes. And I did that. Like Alan Zweibel, he's this big Jewish writer. Well, he was really weird, man. He made me feel really guilty about the way his people suffered in Egypt. So he'd get undressed and have me sing Go Down Moses. It got stranger, man. I'm not kidding. Like, did you know some comedy writers don't like to work in the office? They work at home and at night. And they don't write things down. They act them out first. Like Tom Schiller asked me to act out a scene with him at his apartment. Then he called two other writers, Tom Davis and Al Franken, and because he said he was having trouble with his inspiration. So they came over and we all acted out the scene, except it wasn't in the show, which I thought was really weird. And after a while, it got even more disgusting. Like Michael O'Donoghue, he just couldn't finish writing the Star Trek skit unless I kept whispering to him the words, "Rocket ships are okay, but your missile is tremendous." It was really disgusting. And then there was Herb Sargent. He's this older writer with white hair, and he was really like a father figure, a really strict father. Like, you know, he used to take his belt and tie me up and spank me. And I didn't even do anything wrong. Anyways, that's why I've written this book. It's called I Was Not a Sucker for Saturday Night. Because I really think the public has a right to know. Saturday night? Yes, okay, I'll be right up. I have to help Chevy write update. Okay, let's see. Pad, pencil, and apparatus. It's really disgusting.
That's what we've got for you. That was Sherry. Well, it was Laraine Newman playing Sherry. And that's what we've got for you this week. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you were able to listen to that concise argument and maybe put together a case in your own head for voting for Laraine Newman when voting opens. In case you aren't registered to vote and I don't send you an email, you can always vote through the social links when I send those out. That will be middle of May this year. And then we will make the announcement on the last episode of the show. We'll, of course, be doing a roundtable where we gather some people to discuss their nominees and the way that they are going to vote. And then we turn it over to you. Next week, we're turning it over to our good friend, Kirsten Rajala, and she will put together a case for Taran Killam. That should be a good one, folks. You're gonna want to download that episode. So without further ado, I have a favor to ask of you. If you could please, on your way out, as you walk past the Weekend Update exhibit, turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Donance saying, see you next week.